have a confession to make. I've been an artist for my entire life, for decades. I went to university for art, I went to graduate school for art, I was a university art professor, and I never kept a sketchbook. But let me explain. I've had lots of sketchbooks over the years, but when I was in school, sketchbooks were a place where you did thumbnails for a finished piece, or where you worked out just little techniques, or where you jotted down the basic idea for a bigger completed piece that you were going to do. They were never some place where you brought your A game and did paintings that you were really proud of. And a few years ago, my husband and I were house hunting, and there was an artist studio in this house that we were visiting. And that artist had a stack of different sketchbooks where he had beautiful paintings of all of these different places that he had visited. And so it awakened in me this yearning to create some of my own beautiful sketchbooks that I could leave for future generations. I love the idea to think that some grandchild or great-grandchild will be able to look through work that I created. I would love if I had pieces like that from some of my ancestors. And so in 2018, I picked up this sketchbook and I decided that it was going to be a place where I painted things that I was really proud of, things that I spent a little bit of time on. And it was also my first time working a little bit smaller. I know I work really tiny right now with super teeny tiny sketchbooks, but at the time this was quite small. I was used to working really large. I took my time with this sketchbook. I didn't do everything in one fell swoop. I had lots of paintings that I was doing in between. I only really visited this when I had an idea or something special that I wanted to include in it. And I'm really excited to have completed something that I'm proud of, that stands as an artwork of its own. And one interesting thing that I've discovered is that when I look back through this, I can not only see lots of paintings of places that were special to me, but I can see the evolution of my own growth as an artist, and I love that about it. I was still pretty new to watercolor at the time, and so I worked out a lot of different techniques and tried different things in the sketchbook as well. So I've become a real advocate of people keeping a nice sketchbook where they put in works that they care about, that they can look back at later and see their own growth as artists. So I thought it would be kind of fun to take a look and show you this sketchbook from the beginning to the end. And so here we go. So this first one was done on January 7th, 2018, and it's of a view in a town where I used to live. It's in a town called Cotman, which is in Devon, England. And one thing that strikes me when I look at this is how minimal I was with the ink in these early drawings. Even here with the tree, there are lines that aren't even connected to the rest of the tree. I'm going to really try to not criticize myself too much on these because they were sketchbook paintings. They were an evolution of my growth. And watercolor was still very, very new to me in 2018. So this is someplace where I really honed my skills and practiced a lot of that craft. So I'm going to try to just show you these and tell you when they were painted and a little bit about them without talking too badly about myself or my art. So this one was completed just a few days later, and at that time I did a 30-day challenge where I was drawing and painting every day for the month of January. Not everyone was in this sketchbook. A lot of them were on loose sheets of paper and were on various sizes. This is a scene in a town called Newton Abbot, which is also in Devon. In fact, most of the watercolors in here are of Devon. And again, I was starting to work on some of the ink work. I think you can see here if I come up close, where I was trying to develop a looser style, but I was still a little bit timid about putting in too much ink. And that's something that you're going to see continued throughout this. I was more focused on using the ink as a framework for the watercolor as opposed to having the ink stand on its own and then having the watercolor be a complement to it, which is where I am now with this style. This was done on January 10th, 2018. Again, part of that 30-day challenge. And this one, I can see the struggle that I had with the watercolor paper now. So I feel like I understand why it's not where I would want it to be. Also, the paper that I learned around the edges, as my fingers handled them and different oils from those got on the pages, there were problems with the upper strip and the bottom strip in a lot of these. I do still like the jaunty composition, and maybe someday I'll actually try doing this composition again, knowing what I know now about watercolor. I do want to add that these first sketches were done with the Cotman watercolor set. I didn't really start using professional watercolors until a little bit later. And also, I was still using sap green at this point. And so when I look at these early sketches, I can definitely see that the greens don't look very realistic because that sap green with Winsor and Newton it has too many pigments in it. It has different yellows and blues than are in the rest of the palette. And it's a color that I've really not welcomed in my life since then. Also, I am showing you this sketchbook with natural sunlight. I think that you're seeing it on the screen more or less the way that I'm seeing it in real life. This was January 13th, 2018, and I was really proud of this. This was a really complicated perspective for me to draw. I was let down again with the trees and the sap green in the background, but I do love this collection of old buildings. And again, a few days later, January 15th, this is still one of my favorite little compositions ever. I was playing around here a lot with adding and layering different colors for the rooftops and also for streets to show wet pavement. And here I was playing around with different trees and shrubs. And I was also noticing some of the limitations of the paper where I wasn't able to pick up some colors if they got a little bit too dark. You're seeing a wrestling here of me developing skills, but being limited by the paper. And I was starting to build and be braver with some of the cross-hatching with my ink work on this one as well. And this is an example of why I would recommend using the best paper that you can afford. Because if this had been 100% cotton paper, I think that I would have struggled a lot less on the greens. But I still do like this painting quite a bit. And this was January 21st, 2018. I think it's a boring composition. I don't have much to say about it, although I was starting to develop a style for creating the different brickwork and again, the street. And this is January 26th, 2018. And again, that sap green is really coming forward in the painting. And I think it's not too long after here that I started to use professional watercolors. So it is also interesting to see the difference between the two. I love the composition of this. I would like to actually do this painting again because I did find I was limited with the paper on the water. So I'm not happy with the water, but I liked the bridge. I love the composition on this one. And I think I'd like to do this composition again in the style that I've developed where I'm more brave about the ink work. This one was January 27th, 2018, and then January 29th. Again, this is a composition that I'm really happy with. And it's so interesting to revisit these because I look at it and I see how almost timid I was with the line work. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but now when I approach a line and wash painting, I try to develop the value with the ink and then have the watercolor be an accompaniment to that. But here I was just using the line work as a loose framework still. But I do like this 3-point perspective where you're looking up. So there's a point up here, and then there's a point over here and a point over here, over that way. And then I had a break of several months from working in the sketchbook. And to be fair, I was working on other paintings. So this doesn't mean that I wasn't painting at all during this time. It just means that there was a hiatus between me working in the sketchbook. So we go from January 29th, 2018 to July 24th. And this is a scene, it's the only one in the book where I spanned 2 pages, sort of. I only did a little bit over here. And it's also one of the only ones in the book that isn't in England. This was in America, and I painted this one plein air, and it took a really long time. This was at a plein air festival, and I noticed that several of the oil painting artists around me were just whipping out their paintings in 2 hours, and it took me probably 4 for this, which at the time felt really bad. But looking back, it's nice to be reminded about how much slower these paintings were for me in the long run and how much quicker I am now at being able to draw. And I think that that should be encouragement to everybody, that in the beginning, you can expect that your drawings and your paintings are going to take a lot longer because you're still learning, you're still figuring things out. But I remember the day, and I love that about it. I remember the day and the artists that I spoke with, and it's a really happy memory. And then again, there was a big break because this painting was done on November 13th, 2018. And I was very happy with the sketch and very unhappy with the colors, specifically the yellows. They became a little bit too greeny and acidic, and I was not able to shift that on this paper. And again, some of that oil marking from my fingers is evident on the top. One thing I'm really proud of were these little stones. This is something that I practiced a lot, layering multiple colors instead of worrying about drawing each individual rock or just splodging it together into an impression. And I can see here I'm still using that sap green and the greens. So I did not really start working with the professional watercolors yet. I'll let you know, and we'll see if you can see a difference as to when I shifted from student watercolors to professional. And then again, there was a big jump. So this was November 13th, 2018, and this is March 25th, 2019. So a good 4 months later, and here is the shift. So these were the professional watercolors, and I was just amazed at the difference that I could get in the vibrancy of the colors and also in the layering. Even on this paper, which I'm not really happy with, there's just a crispness and, I don't know, a more professional look to the watercolors because they are more pigmented. I was really happy with the layering on the rooftops here. And this is in a town called Budleigh Salterton, which is also in Devon. And the next one is also was done 2 days later, and it is of that same town. And again, just noticing the vibrancy of the colors compared to the student watercolors. And I was having a lot of fun drawing the little seagulls and putting in the sand of the beach. And this one's almost more cartoon-like in the treatment of the birds and everything. But again, this paper is sort of like you put it down once and you can't mess with it again. So there's a little bit of luck involved, more than skill, really, with working on this paper. But I am pretty happy with this guy. And then this just a few days later on the 31st of March, 2019. And this is, again, a scene in America. And this was a picture that my stepdaughter took of my step-grandchildren, of her children. And they were around the fountain in Old Tucson. And I used to live in Tucson for 10 years. I went to university there for both my bachelor's and my master's. And so the Old Tucson Mission is a building that I really felt a strong affinity for. I did struggle with this guy, and this guy is one that I had to redo and add gouache to, and that's why that's a lot more vibrant and almost solid, unlike some of the previous guys. And then we skip ahead a few months to May 13th, 2019, and I loved this old cottage. I was struggling with some of the foliage, but again, working on building the stone walls and layering the streets. And I really found that I loved those. And I was able to get the yellow, like the creamy beige-ish, almost yellow color of this building in a way that I was pleased with. I do think I might still have been using sap green. I don't know for sure. I think I was using Viridian, but I wasn't really mixing greens purely from blue and yellow yet, I don't think. But this was an example of the sky went down really nicely here, but the oils of my fingers kind of messed it up a bit in that corner. And now we move to June 22nd, 2019. And this one I really was pleased with. I liked the perspective of it. I liked the road and the composition as a whole. I struggled a bit with the atmospheric perspective. I would have liked these trees in the background to be a little bit softer and not as dark, but I do still really like this painting. A few weeks later, this is July 4th, 2019, and this is a church in Little Hempston, Devon. And it was a trickier one to draw because it's so long, but I had a lot of fun putting in the little tiny windows here. And I started experimenting with different ways to do grasses. Again, this is not the paper to do that with. I'm struggling a bit with this paper, and I believe I might have even had to go in and layer some gouache on top of it. But it was a newer technique that I really enjoyed a lot. And I like the little flag up there too. This is again a few days later, July 10th, 2019. I think this is about when I wanted to really start YouTube, and I did a few time lapses. So this one I believe is a time lapse. I don't know if this one is or not. But again, I had a lot of trouble getting this pink of this building correct, and so that I used gouache with. But one thing I was really happy with was right here, the reflection of the pink of this onto this white wall, and to retain the brightness that you could see of the sun peeking through this little alley here. So I was happy with that, and the lighter touches on the foliage. And this is in Shalden, Devon. And about a week later, July 18th, 2019, this is a scene in the moors. I love this building, this house. It's up near Haytor, which is one of the tors in Devon, and it's just this big, open, desolate scene. And I believe I snapped this photo in the winter. I could be wrong. Again, I struggled with the sky, so I did have to layer over with a gouache, and that's why the sky looks a bit different. But I think there is a time lapse of this painting as well, maybe even on YouTube. I did a few time lapses in 2019 and then completely forgot about YouTube again until 2022, the very end of 2022. And this one was several months later, so more than 6 months later, February 2020. And I had to have emergency surgery. And so I was in the hospital for like about a week before the surgery. And I brought this sketchbook and I painted this from my hospital bed. It's the only painting that I did whilst I was there, but this is of a photograph of Door County, Wisconsin, of a farm scene. And I really liked the perspective of having the vertical format. And this is one of those ones I look at and think, I'd like to try this one again. I think I could do it so much better now. And this is the only one that's in that format instead of the landscape format. So shifting ahead a few months later to July 2020, and this is in Ilsington, Devon. And I feel like I almost didn't push this one enough, but I was pretty happy with the yellow here and the peach. And yeah, it's okay. I think at this point, my goal was more to finish the book than to do good paintings. So there are a few that I'm not so happy with. Next is March. Oh gosh, another huge jump. So July 2020 to March 2021. It says here the 3rd of September. So I did the drawing on the 3rd of September, but I didn't do the watercolor until the 7th of March. So I left it a long time. And again, I was really struggling with the paper here. I was getting the colors down. They were too dark and I couldn't lift them the way you can on 100% cotton paper. And this is about a little over a month later in April 2021. And I tried a glaze over this. So I had the whole painting. It was looking really nice. And I had the idea to layer a yellowish glaze over the whole painting, which I did. And I preferred it before I did that. But again, this is how you learn and grow, by trying different things. And then this is interesting because this says April 27th and this says April 28th. So I don't know what was up there, but maybe I did the drawings and the paintings at different times. But this was April 27th, 2021. And this again is from a photograph I took in Ellison Bay, Wisconsin. And it was the site of one of my first plein air paintings in oils that I did. And that painting is at my mother's house. I don't think I really finished it, but I remember being out there and painting, and another artist was there down the road and he also was painting. And I still love this scene. This is one I also would like to revisit again someday. And this is a few months later. This is a church in Norway, and this is a photograph by somebody I follow on Instagram named John O'Neill. And he had taken a photograph of this. I thought the church was so beautiful, and he gave me his permission to use it for this painting. And I just loved the architecture and the subtlety of it. And then this is one of my favorites in the book. It was completed on July 14th, 2021. It's from a photograph. I don't remember if it was mine or one that I found. I couldn't tell you for sure. I wish I could. But I loved the stones and playing around with the different painting of those and the shadows on these houses, and actually putting color into houses that are white as the color is reflected from everything around it, including the sky. And I really liked that rooftop there. So this is one of my favorite compositions in the book. And this one was September 2021, so a few months later. And this is a scene in Ogwell, Devon. And I painted this one partly on site, partly not. I like this painting. Again, I still wasn't really getting into the line work too much, but I had a lot of fun experimenting with the composition and the telephone wires and the electrical wires and even putting in the car. This was skip ahead a few more months again to December 3rd, 2021. And this is around this time is when I started really posting on social media regularly. Not here, but around here. So this is when I started posting regularly on TikTok, and I really didn't start Instagram and YouTube for another year and a half. Seriously, there are one or two things up there from then, but I was mostly focused on TikTok at the time. And then this one is the painting of the cottage from the holiday. Again, that is something I'd like to draw and paint again because the colors were much too vibrant. That cottage is not this vibrant, even in bright sunlight. So in that respect, I'm not crazy about it, but it is what it is. And then this one was from the Gilmore Girls. This was January 2022. And I was really struggling with the greens here. I was mixing my own greens. I wasn't using the sap green anymore. I didn't have a great photo reference for this. I just wanted to do it. Some of the mark making on the trees is becoming a little more bold for me. And then skip ahead another month to February 7th and 8th, 2022. And this is a view of Shaftesbury, which is, I think it's in Somerset, Shaftesbury, but it's in England. And this is an iconic view of walking down the street and all these little cottages. And I was really happy with the drawing and the first part of the painting, but again, struggling with the colors in the background and not being able to lift them. And then February 9th, 2022, this is a view of Castle Combe, which is in Wiltshire, which is also in England. And I could find lots of things wrong with this. I don't love this one, but I don't hate it. And then there was a huge break, and this is where I really see a big jump in style. So from February 2022, and there were only a few pages left, and I just thought, I really need to finish this sketchbook. So from February 9th, 2022 to February 22nd, 2023, and I can notice a huge shift in my treatment where I was really starting to get a lot more bold with my ink and a lot more expressive with that. I really hesitated even to paint this one because I loved the ink part of it so much, but I did paint it and the painting went well. So I do really like this. And this is a fishing village. Oh, okay. Sorry, I just realized I did the drawing and left it as a drawing, and I didn't do the painting until February 2023. So really just a little over a year ago, I did the painting. I left it black and white because I really liked it so much. And it wasn't until I finished the whole sketchbook that I came back and did the painting. I'll make a note of that on here so I remember in future. Because this was November 23rd, 2022. And this was a commission I did for Pentel on Instagram. And I was pretty happy with this one. And also the paper was not behaving too badly. And then the final one of the book was completed in November 25th, 2022. And it was this scene. And this also was for a commission for Pentel. And again, let me angle it towards the light. You really get the better sense of it if I angle it towards the light. But I was really happy with the way the colors went down, especially considering it was the Moleskine. But maybe it knew that it was the last sheet and I had vowed never to use another Moleskine for watercolor again. But this one I was pretty pleased with as well. So yeah, that is my sketchbook. And if I compare it to, again, some of these earlier ones from 2018, and then compare them to later, I can definitely see my own personal growth. And that's the really nice thing about keeping a sketchbook and not trying to cram it or fill it gratuitously just to fill it, but taking your time and doing it only when you really feel like you have the energy and the time to put into trying to create something that you're proud of. So that is my sketchbook. I hope this encourages you to keep your own sketchbook and to document your own process, and make sure you write down dates and places as you paint things, because you will forget. You won't think you will, but you will. I had my printer make these 2 little zines. Each one includes 10 different images of Devon from the sketchbook. This is the first one. I'll give you a little mini tour. I do sell these in my shop, and you could use them separately as just a little look-through book, or you could cut them out and you could frame them. And then here's a little mini tour of the second one. And if you're interested in these, I'll include the link to my website in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here, and I hope you have a beautiful day. Happy painting!